My title is career practitioner. So it's kind of like a guidance counselor. I have been working with Edmonton Public School Board for 10 years in March, working with older high school students. So they're fourth and fifth year, but like at that stage where they're ready to take the next step into post-secondary or their career planning, like whether that's apprenticeship, college, or some kind of training for post-sec. So I've been doing that for like, yeah, almost 10 years. And then before that, I worked for college in recruitment and advising as well. And I taught adult ed. I taught English in the evenings for almost 10 years as well. So I've kind of been working in adult ed advising for my whole career.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've been involved with students for a lot of your career.
Yes. And I think the same, like the demographic of this project, like they've all been adults. So I graduated in 2009 with my Bachelor of Education degree in secondary ed. And I continued to only work with adults. Like I never worked with junior high or even a local community school. It was all adult ed. So, and all like, I think that's what makes this like project a good fit because that's all I've been doing is like that, like grade 12 or 30 level, like next step is university, not like the younger kids. So yeah, it's been really good.
And obviously you've enjoyed it so far, right?
Yeah, I really like it. I think adult ed is like where my heart lies. Like, I don't know. It's an interesting topic to think about, like what next step I might do, because this is sort of like connected to the conversation, like with young people trying to figure out what their first step is with university or college or what they want to do. And like the truth is like we're always evolving, right? Like what you do or what career you set out to do, you likely are going to evolve, grow. We don't stay in the same jobs like our parents or, the older generations. We kind of like to try new things. And I've always thought I might go back to school, but I don't know for sure if I will or not.
Did you get like your master's?
Yeah. And for a long time, I wanted to get into like more personal counseling because my role at the high school that I work at is like post-secondary advising, financial aid. I work with our LGBTQ population, but then as soon as it kind of moves into like, anxiety or depression or things like that, then I have to refer them. So I always was wondering if maybe I'd like to take on that as well. But yeah, I need to go back to school and get my master's degree. So I don't know yet. We'll see.
Well, I think you'll do well.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like you just have to take a step, right? Which is like what these kids have to do. Like the youth that we're referring to and talking to is just taking the first step, right? So
yeah. I've talked to a couple of students about counselors at their school, like guidance counselors, obviously. And their number one thing that I keep running into is how much older these counselors are than them, right? Right. So they'll be coming out of high school or they'll be in high school and they'll have a counselor that's maybe 60 years old or 50 something years old, and they feel like they can't really relate to them. Right. So it's good to have a young person in that role, kind of guiding them along where they feel comfortable enough to tell them any kind of situation or whatever situation they're going through and how to seek guidance, essentially.
Yeah, I guess I never thought about that, but that does make sense. Like that you could feel like that sense of relatability. And even with me kind of being in the same shoes in a sense, like considering going back to school and trying to compare different programs or the cost, figuring out how I would pay for it, what type of like, career options would come out of a graduate degree, I guess is like kind of similar to what students are trying to figure out in high school, right?
Absolutely. And we're happy to have you on board because it seems like you have a wealth of knowledge to share with us too, right? And
Thank you.
For sure.
Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is a great opportunity. I'm really excited to be here.
That's good. Okay. So in terms of getting into university, is there a specific average that these students need to have, or does it vary?
It absolutely varies so much. It varies by province, it varies by school, and then it varies by program. So I can't even tell you, like a student who says to me, okay, I want to be a nurse, what mark do I need? I can tell you it needs to be competitive, so it needs to be high, but I can't even tell you like the specific percentage. Most universities have gone away from telling a specific average, and mainly that's because they want students to apply, I think, is one of the reasons. And the other reason is that they admit on a rolling basis, which means from October, when applications open, all the way until, let's say, June, they continue to admit students. So the average kind of can slightly fluctuate a few percentages. Um, so I can tell you that it's competitive, which means it's high, and you need to have as high of an average as possible. But I can't tell students, usually I can't tell them exactly what average they need to have, which is why I recommend they have backup plan. But yes, the marks, so nursing, for example, engineering, sciences, commerce, like these are really, really competitive fields. So students have to have a certain number of courses, and this also varies by province. In Alberta, it's five, and in many provinces, it's five grade 12, 30 level academic courses. But like in Ontario, for example, it's six. So students will have to be kind of cautious when they're looking at admissions, and I can kind of show an example of that later, how many courses they need. And then really competitive schools also are looking at other factors as well. Like they're looking at supplementary material, for example, portfolio, personal profile. UBC requires all students to complete a personal profile. They're so competitive. They need something for students to kind of be set apart because everybody's applying with really high grades. So what makes you unique? What makes you what are the challenges that you've faced that have like added to your character or the way affected the way that you see the world and how that's going to impact like the way that you give back to your community? Do they need references, like somebody to write about your academic strength? So the competition is just based on so many things apart from and or in addition to grades. Um, admissions also looks at they call it breadth. So like what is your range of academic courses? Like have you only primarily studied, let's say, fine art classes like theater and drama and maybe, you know, a language or whatever? Or have you kind of reached across multiple uh, types of studies? So like a little bit of math and English and humanities and some art. They want to see kind of a range and a reach, just to see like the competencies across subject matter. That would be an example. Like some admissions officers actually specifically look at students' transcripts, like they literally read them and look at what their history is. Whereas some universities, it's a computer and they're just looking for those top 5 or 6 academic courses, you know, English, statistics, chemistry, physics, whatever. And then what are the marks? And that's all they're looking for. So it's so hard to say to a student what they need because it varies. Some universities require a high school diploma, but some don't. So, you know, if a young person hasn't, for some reason, had an interruption in their high school and they don't have their high school diploma, there are for sure options that don't require it. But some provinces are pretty tough. They do typically require it. And then another factor that a lot of students don't realize is that really competitive universities and competitive programs will disqualify candidates if they've taken a course more than one time to get the mark that they're hoping to get. So let's say they're aiming for a 90% average and they've had to take their biology twice or 3 times. Some admissions will decline applicants who have made second or third or fourth attempts. Not all, but some. So it's something that students kind of have to be aware of, I suppose, as they're kind of going through their high school journey. The other thing, I don't even think it's on here, but the other thing is that many post-secondaries also look at grade 11. So if I was talking to a grade 10 student or a grade 11 student, I might say, what you take now really does matter, and it can really impact you in a positive way if you do well in grade 11, because universities tend to think, well, they know that how a student does in grade 11 is a better predictor of how they'll do in grade 12 rather than a midpoint or progress grade in grade 12. So taking a wide breadth of courses in grade 11, doing as well as you can before you have those provincial diploma exams would be I would highly advise that. There are some schools that will literally kind of give admission based on grade 11, just assume, and then of course they have to complete the grade 12, but they'll get early admission kind of based on how they did in grade 11. So it's really, really, really important. It's not like, I think it's just universities are just more and more and more and more competitive.
Mhm. I have 3 questions.
Sure.
The first question would go back to our first video, where to start.
Yeah.
How many programs would you tell a student to apply for? Like knowing that programs are competitive, just to give themselves a little bit of a break or a chance to get into post-secondary. Would you say apply to 5, 1, 2? What's the magic number you think a student should apply for?
That's absolutely such a good question. I would say if you're for sure two, and one of them should be less competitive. So if you're choosing a really, really competitive program to apply to, make sure you have one that's less, just less competitive, because if you apply to multiple, unless your average is just really, really outstanding and your extracurriculars are outstanding, then certainly. But if I could advise students, I would say pick your top and then pick kind of like your second choice, at least, if not also your third choice. And we are going to talk about that when we come to the application page, but applications all cost money. So students kind of have to juggle the reality of what their marks are and the likelihood of getting into certain competitive programs with their financial, situation. Applications are at least $100, if not upwards of that. So they kind of have to juggle, the reality and their goals to make that decision. But I would say at least two. Most universities, not all, most allow 2 program choices with the application. So, if nursing is your first choice, you could choose something else as your second choice, education, business, whatever, right? So I would also 100% take advantage of the 2 choices. Like, don't just put one choice, definitely put a second choice.
Okay. The second question is, I remember you were saying some universities differ in some aspects in terms of their averages and stuff like that. I'm guessing you can get that information on the website as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can show you some examples of for students, where they might look, because they really need to go directly to the school's website to find out for sure, right? Because even nursing at one school, the courses might be different than what another school is asking. So they definitely need to go to the university website to see what those courses are. And keep in mind that for Bachelor of Arts, the course requirements, so English, social studies, whatever, biology, science, it doesn't matter, but they're going to be much more flexible in kind of a humanities or arts degree than if you're trying to get into engineering, nursing, pharmacy, things like that. Well, this is about, I think it might be important because we've just been talking a bit, mostly about academic, the academic side of admission, but a lot of programs, for example, social work, are not so much competitive on your grades, but they really want to see that you've done some work to see what it is like to be a social worker. What is it like to work with vulnerable populations or at-risk youth, or in, somebody who's facing a housing crisis or substance abuse? They really want to see that a student has kind of gone out of their way to get as much real life exposure and rich exposure as much as they can, more than what their grades are, right? So they want to see, so students should really try to take advantage of any volunteer opportunities especially for those types of careers. Same thing with like becoming a teacher, because a lot of these programs will ask for students to fill out either fill out forms that that ask them to reflect on what this experience has taught them, or they're required to complete, like for example, there's a Casper test or there's other situational judgment tests that look at how do you make decisions that don't have a right or wrong answer. So, you know, how do you make that decision? What is your rationale? Why did you make it? What is it in your life that kind of brought you to the place to think about the world in the way that you do? Things like that, that are looking more at a kind of the personality and
The human being side of
yeah, not just like, can you score straight A's? Like, what kind of person are you? And can people, like, if you do volunteer work, or usually they ask even for references. So can someone speak to your ethical ability or your communication skills or your ability to remain calm in a really stressful environment, like things like that, right? That you can't measure on a test.
Mm.
So that I would say for students, that any opportunities that they can to get into a real life experience where they can kind of reference those situations on a test like that or on a form would be valuable for them.
Okay. But again, that depends on the program that you're going into.
It does, yeah. In general, I do recommend it for students, but of course it just totally depends. Like, you know, another one we haven't really talked about would be like if you're interested in art or design, user experience programs, you're going to need a portfolio, right? So, and that's going to be again not based on academics, but certainly like um, uh, based on your talent and your skills, like in another way, right?
Okay. Actually, another question: how long should students plan prior to applying for school? How much time should they give themselves so they're not stressed?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I would say, like, okay, ideally, I would say students should think about it in grade 11 for sure, if not grade 10, if they can. I know this isn't the reality for many of our students, and that's okay. But applications generally open up 11 months prior to the school starting. So if school starts in September, generally they open up October for the following year. And the earlier you really explore the requirements, whether they're academic or not, and the more sooner that you start working on those and either building your portfolio or making sure you have the volunteer hours, getting those references, the relationships with coaches, teachers, advisors, the people who are going to have to write those letters for you, the sooner you can kind of start working on that and building that, for sure, the better. The last minute, you don't want to be in a position where it's all last minute, because that's much harder to complete in a meaningful and high value way, I would say.
Okay,
Mhm.
that's good. Grade 10, I feel for me, I feel is a little young, but I totally understand where you're coming from, because the more time we have to research a certain program, the better it is for us in the long run, right? But a lot of
Yeah,
people would disagree that in grade 10, you really know what you want to do, you know?
of course.
But planning it is perfect.
I think if maybe what we could say, instead of like thinking you have to know in grade 10, it would be like try to experience things you're interested in, like play a sport, get on a team, join this, you know, in a club, like kind of just get involved, even take a part-time job, like just things to experience the world around you and form connections. And I think maybe is better advice than like, because I agree, like grade 10 is really, really young. It's just, I think because schools are so much more competitive than they used to be. It's really, it's pretty crazy.
Mhm. I agree. Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying about grade 10, because, like I said, a lot of people or students coming into the post-secondary, they don't necessarily have, they're probably an older sibling, the oldest sibling. So they
Yeah,
don't have a history to fall back on, or someone to
yeah,
say, hey, how did you do it? Or what did you think about when you were going through this? So,
totally.
yeah, so the earlier the better in those situations, absolutely.
Mhm. And I mean, like I said, the population I primarily work with are older. So this is not to say that it's not possible to get all your ducks in a row when you're an older student, 20, 21, 22. Like my students are all older. So it's certainly not to say that that's not possible. Absolutely, it is possible. You might just have to explore more options, right? And we're so lucky in Canada, there are always backup options. Like there's, okay, the top 5 or top 10 universities, sure. But there are so many other, even in our city in Edmonton, Alberta, if you can't get into the University of Alberta, you can look at MacEwan University, you can look at Concordia University, and some of these smaller universities even offer better, or at least I would say at least give them a fair run for their money in terms of like what a smaller class size, maybe more support, maybe more lab time, like things like that. So it's not to say that it's certainly not possible if somebody didn't get stellar grade 11 marks or start doing all of this, like it's not to say that there's not options and possibilities. Absolutely.
Okay, for sure.